much everyone for signing up to the Valuing Volunteer webinar. We really appreciate your time and looking forward to a good evening. So the main areas that we want to cover tonight are to share some Archery GB volunteer insight, to provide an overview of Archery GB's volunteer campaign, so a bit of background, what we've done and what still needs to be done, and then to hopefully provide some top tips and ideas on a volunteering journey, so looking at recruiting, retaining, recognising and rewarding volunteers. So lots of R's, which is hard to say. And we've got a few expert people speaking tonight, so thank you very much for their time too. And then we just want some sort of open discussion so we can share good practice and support each other, and then finally signpost you to some useful resources. So the format tonight, as you're probably very familiar, if you don't mind putting yourselves on mute when others are speaking, just to reduce background noise. Cameras are optional, but it's really nice to see a face behind a name. And we really want you to contribute to the discussions, to give us feedback on the campaign, as well as sharing your positive experiences, as well as not so positive experiences, so we can help each other learn and develop. So yeah, please use the chat box or raise your hand, and then you can come onto the microphone. So on the call tonight, we have Terry Collier from Netherhall Archers. Terry has been recruited through our volunteer campaign and now is stuck in it, helping us. We've got Nikki Ledwick, David Holland, and hopefully all of you will contribute tonight. So from Archery GB's point of view, we've got Katie, who through our new structure is one of our regional officers for the North region, and also sort of a national responsibility for volunteers and judges. And I'm Gail Pink, so I'm clubs and communities, and also responsible for the Midlands and the northern region, as well as sort of ambassadors and mentors and Project Ramaya. First of all, just wanted to highlight how integral volunteers are to archery. They're pretty much the heartbeat of the sport, responsible for delivering from grassroots community level to club to county to region, all the way up to national level. So we've just tried to highlight some of the many roles our volunteers take within a club committee and some of Archery GB's many volunteer groups, all the way up to Archery GB board. So to start with, just wanted to provide you with some results from the volunteer survey, which was completed in January 2020. We had 1,702 responses, and the aim of the survey was to better understand our volunteer workforce, so we can identify what resources and supports our volunteers need, and hopefully create an excellent environment for volunteering. As volunteers are so desperately important to archery, it's really important that they have a positive volunteering experience. To complete the volunteering survey is also a requirement of our Sport England UK sport funding, so it links to Tier 3 code for sports governance. We also share the sort of top line data with Sport England, and it obviously helps them to develop programmes and support for sports volunteers across all the different sports. So the first result is the main volunteer roles. So the top two volunteer roles, I'm sure it's no surprise, are coaching or instructing at 36%, and then administration or committee role, which equates to 34%, and then providing any other support at 21%. So duration of volunteering in archery, again, it might not be a surprise, but most of our volunteers have been volunteering for a considerable amount of time. So 31% have been volunteering for more than 10 years, 28% have been volunteering for 3 to 5 years, and only 10% are new to volunteering in archery. This also correlates with the average duration of an Archery GB member, which is 4.1 years. So I think this helps highlight that those that volunteer often stay in the sport for longer. So it's a good retention programme for archery. So volunteer frequency, 58% of volunteers volunteer at least once a week, whereas 25% less than once a week, but sort of less than a month. So again, this sort of really does highlight the value of volunteering to a club. If a club had to pay for all of these volunteers' time, it would equate to a lot of money. So again, our volunteers help keep archery costs down low. So the top 7 reasons for taking up volunteering in archery: 68% want to improve things and help people maybe put something back into the sport they love. 48% to use their existing archery skills and knowledge, whereas 40% want to learn new archery skills and knowledge. 37% said that they had spare time, so want to help their club. 27% felt that there was no one else to do it, so they had to step forward and volunteer their time to help their club keep running. 22% wanted to meet people and make friends, and then 14% their child participated in the sport, so they sort of got roped into volunteering that way. I think this is a really positive slide, that 93% of volunteers are satisfied with their volunteering experience. So 41% are very satisfied and 52% are fairly satisfied. But there are still 7% that are not satisfied with their experience. So it's just to identify what we can do to push those figures higher up into very satisfied. This question asked what's important to a volunteer's experience, and asked them to rank the importance for about 20 different statements. And these were the top 3 statements for very important. So delivering a good experience for those taking part, enjoying it and having fun, and getting satisfaction from seeing the results. And then the important top 3 were maintaining connection with the sport or activity. So again, that links to retaining people within the sport, having a chance to do the things I'm good at, and making friends. So I think this is really positive, that people really enjoy the social part, having fun and making friends, as well as trying to deliver a positive experience to the people within the sport. This question again asked people to agree or disagree with about 14 statements. So the top 3 definitely agree was that I can cope with the things I'm asked to do. I'm given the opportunity to do the things I like to do, and then my efforts are appreciated by the organisation. And then on the flip side, the statements that they definitely disagree with are: my help is not really needed, I get bored or lose interested, and I feel volunteering is becoming too much like a paid job. So again, quite positive results. The top 3 ways volunteers like to feel valued is a written thanks from Archery GB, discounted or free kits, and for qualifications and training to be paid for. The reasons why people stop volunteering is nothing in particular, so it might be family circumstances or life situations that they maybe step away from the sport. Number 2, they feel their efforts aren't always appreciated. And then at 3, they've kind of had enough. They feel that they've done their bits, and now it's someone else's turn to step up and get involved. And then finally, a question was, is enough being done to recruit volunteers at sort of county, regional and archery GB level? So 31% said yes, but 69% said no. So that links really nicely into our volunteer campaign. Before we go into that, are there any sort of specific questions or feedback around the insight? Nope. Okay, well, I'll plough on and we can come back to that at the end of the session. So as I've sort of said, volunteers are really important to Archery GB, and it will be a key part of our new strategy, which hopefully will be launched in April. So volunteers is always been on the agenda, but also the campaign came about because of the impact of COVID. So potentially there might be less volunteers in a club because they might be shielding or at risk due to sort of the age and demographic of our members. Or unfortunately, volunteers might not be able to do their usual volunteer role because of club closures or limited club activities, or some of our competition volunteers aren't able to do their normal role because there's not so many competitions being run. Sport England have done a lot of insight and research into the impact of COVID on volunteers, and evidence suggests that as many as 14% of volunteers may not return to volunteering following the pandemic. So obviously this will affect sport dramatically. And then the coronavirus pandemic has changed the way clubs operate and consequently impacted on the volunteer needs of the club. We know that our volunteers have had to really step up, do things differently, continually react to the ever-changing government guidance. Maybe more volunteers are needed to clean all the equipment. So basically, we identified a need to recruit new volunteers and to deploy existing volunteers. So I will now pass over to Katie, who will talk through what we've done. You're on mute, Katie.
There you go. I tried to keep off it because of this thing. Hi everyone. So as you're aware, we did the survey in January. From that survey, we then surveyed the people who said that they would like to volunteer in any form of capacity. We then volunteered them, asking them some specific questions around the skills matrix which we've created there. So we got 269 people who responded from that, which I know it seems quite a big drop between 894 and 269, but it is still quite a lot because it's people. Oh,
yes, sorry,
you can't see the slides.
No, the slides have disappeared.
Bear with me a second.
Our practice earlier didn't pay off.
There you go.
Brilliant.
There you go. Right. So yeah. So sorry, as I said, the number does seem low, but it isn't in terms of kind of how many people do get back after they've been surveyed once. We also surveyed the clubs, and the reason for that was just to see who wanted any support from Archery GB. So we had 107 clubs who would like some support. Now, funnily enough, though, out of those 107. Probably about, I think it was 70% at the time, said yes, they would like help, but they wouldn't like help from anybody who wasn't in their club. So it made this matching up pairing a little bit difficult for us, because if people hadn't joined from their club, there wasn't a lot we could do about it. So what we did is we matched the people with people within their region. So for example, if we had 3 clubs in Berkshire and we had 10 clubs in 10 people in Berkshire, we joined the clubs together, gave the volunteers the club details within their county. We are about to also send the volunteer details to those clubs, but we're just waiting at the moment for them to fill out an additional survey on that. So it was quite a simple way of just getting people's information out there. At the moment, we haven't obviously had any results back because we've only recently done it in the last month or so, but I have had quite a few emails back, and it seems to have gone quite well for some people. But the problem we do have is obviously some of the counties are quite large, and so therefore people are living in lots of different areas and might not live actually quite as close to the county that we've put them in. So some of them have come back and asked for a different county, which has been absolutely fine. So kind of that's where we are at the moment. We do have some things for the future, but before I go into that, Terry, I believe, is just going to go through a few things.
Sorry, you woke me up. Yes, if I could firstly introduce myself. My name is Terry Collier. I'm from Cambridgeshire. I'm new to archery. I actually did a beginner's course January of last year. So I've been shooting for a year where I've been social distanced from everybody, and it's not been a wonderful experience, but it's one that I have quite enjoyed. I started, in fact, by buying my granddaughter a beginner's course for Christmas. Then I found that as she was 13, somebody needed to go along with us. So I bought myself a beginner's course for Christmas, and we started doing it together. I probably don't get an awful lot out of archery from the shooting point of view from my granddaughter, who constantly tells me that she's much better than I. But I do find that the 10 minutes or so that we sit in the car going backwards and forwards from the club is very important. You know, Gramps sometimes is thought of the old geezer, but we do actually sit down and talk, and I think that's very, very good. So the experience I've had so far from archery has been good. As far as volunteering is concerned, I'm far from an avid volunteer. In fact, this is my first volunteering experience. And that might sound dreadful, but I thought I would volunteer, and in doing so to tell people at headquarters what my experience was, and if there's anything that they felt that they could tap into. Just very briefly, my experience is that I've spent most of my working life moving from marketing into sport and leisure. Marketing was an important part. I actually came into leisure via the arts rather than sport. Whilst I was an international judo player, I didn't think of myself as a sportsman. So arts was my introduction. Before retiring, I was the director of the National Sports Centre at Bisham Abbey. I then went on to become the chief executive of the Amateur Boxing Association. And from there, I went to a sport that is convinced is a sport. The Sport England defended themselves quite fiercely in the courts about 18 months ago, and that's bridge. Bridge is a mind sport, but Sport England don't have a mind, so there you go. Just a couple of things from my experience that might help. Amateur boxing was a very strange organisation. The situation with amateur boxing is you have amateur boxing and you have professional boxing. And whilst I accept this amateur football and professional football, there is no or was no interconnection between the two styles. So an amateur boxer, if an amateur boxer went into a professional gym, he could be thrown out of amateur boxing. And if he went into a professional bout, then he would be out of amateur boxing and there would be no route back at any level. So they wouldn't be able to go back to their old club and meet their friends. They just weren't allowed in the club. So that was a very difficult situation. We also had the professionals wanting to cream off the better boxers. And they would do things like approach a boxer and say, there's £1,000 if you sign up with us. And to a lot of kids in their early 20s, £1,000 is a lot. They would sign up and they would go into professional boxing. Their mates have been very good, and therefore their boxing career was a short one. On the amateur side, there were volunteers, and the main volunteers were called matchmakers. These are the people that went out and looked around all of the clubs to find out the boxers that could box with other people on what was referred to as boxing shows. This was the black tie, big cigar boxing event, which raised a lot of money. And many boxing clubs, in fact, didn't have boxers. I think, for instance, the Stable Lads Boxing Club of Newmarket has never had a boxer, but they raise a considerable amount of money for the Stable Lads by fetching in boxers from other places and putting on shows. The problem with the matchmakers is that the matchmakers, and I hope this doesn't come through in the recording, the matchmakers certainly found that money was going in the form of backhanders, and they then wanted to control boxing. So they were there to really stop outsiders coming in as volunteers. What we did about that is that we found out that a lot of people in the boxing clubs that were there that never had any intention of being punched on the nose, so never went into a boxing ring, but they trained. If you want to learn how to skip, there's no better place to go than a boxing club. So very much the fitness side was strong. But as I say, they didn't box, but they wanted to be involved. And we found there that there was a lot of people involved in that side that wanted to volunteer, but were being excluded from volunteering because of the people at the top. We found a way around that by putting in a new category of membership, which was a non-boxing category, and then started to train potential volunteers so that they had the skills necessary to start volunteering within the clubs and within tournaments. In doing that, we found that there was a lot of professional skills there. In particular, we found that a lot of policemen were coming into boxing clubs, and they were coming in for either their own reasons or that this was the place to find the bad lads. And by talking to these people, we suddenly found that we'd got a great deal of support from these police officers that wanted to be involved and wanted to improve the way that boxing worked, and to encourage more kids, both at this time, male and female, into the boxing clubs. And this has proved to be very, very successful. So it's police that are volunteering their time to work in the boxing clubs. So that was proving to be very successful. In going through the stages of weakening the role of the matchmaker in bringing in the volunteers, I must admit I was not the most popular chief executive that had been there, and after a while the pressure came too much. But what I did before leaving is that I managed to start talking to the professional promoters of boxing, people that at this time it was when we were approaching the Sydney Olympics, and we had one boxer in particular a boxer called Audley Harrison, who was there to win a gold medal. I mean, he was good, but the professionals were trying to sign him up as a professional boxer before he actually went to the Olympics. And that happened a lot in boxing up until that time. Fortunately, we managed to talk to the professionals and say, look, if Audley goes to the Olympics and gets the gold medal, it'll be worth considerably more to you. So why don't you support us to take him forward? And that's actually what happened. Audley came away from there then and turned his back on the professional promoters to a great extent, feeling that he could do it himself. And I think the big mistake he made was that the BBC wanted to take him on as a boxer with the view to him in retirement becoming a presenter on Blue Peter. But there you go, they got his career mapped out for them. And last me, and please do tell me if I've gone too much, but volunteering in boxing was very hard to fetch in, and when it did actually materialise, was very, very successful. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Terry, and it's great that we've been able to attract Terry into archery volunteering through our volunteer campaign. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Terry. So if I kind of carry on with what we did alongside the campaign which we spoke about earlier, we got together a couple of different people who we know volunteer and volunteer for us quite a lot, just to discuss ideas, to be honest, at the beginning. And we are trying to make this group larger and larger. So to be honest, if anybody does want to join the group, please feel free to email me, because at the moment we also have another group who are looking at a handy guide, which I'll go through in a second. So we've updated our website, which I'll go through on a couple of other slides. We had a 1 week push on volunteering, so we tried to get it out across as much social and across the website as much as we can, just showing to the rest of the membership how important volunteers are, because we feel that it's not really pushed enough within clubs. There's a lot of club members who feel that, who don't know that actually you are a volunteer to the sport and you're not paid to run the club. So that's why we tried to do as much as possible while we were doing the other campaign at the same time. What we've also tried to do is bring all of our volunteers together. So that includes the judges, it includes, the coaches, etc. Everybody under one umbrella. So the volunteer workforce. Obviously, they'll still have their separate areas in terms of qualifications and things like that. But what we're trying to do is just make sure that everybody understands that everybody is part of the same picture. So the future, we're creating a handy guide at the moment, which will go on the website, just about tips, which some of those we'll go through today, tips about how to recruit, where to recruit, etc. And we're going to try and push the volunteer logo as well, and try and keep pushing volunteers across the organisation. We'd like to bring in some form of kind of award scheme and recognition across the whole of Archery GB, so more of a national scheme. That hasn't been addressed yet, so if anybody does have any ideas for that, that would be brilliant, because at the moment we kind of have an idea, but we're not sure if it'll necessarily work. As I said before, the volunteers webpage we've got today, just to try and push people to understand that volunteers are out there and extending our workforce. We also are going to give Learning Curve, which some of you may be aware of. It's an online platform for mostly coaches at the moment, and we've just included judges into that, so they can see the additional resources that we're using. So Gail, if you wanted to go through the values piece.
Yeah, this is quite new to Archery GB, but as an organisation, we've tried to develop some values, and we just wanted to share them with you tonight to see how you feel about them, and if you think we can get our wider volunteer workforce to sort of sign up to the values as well. So it's sort of, as one archery community, we strive for excellence, we choose to work and learn together, we value people for who they are and contribute they make, and always act with integrity to provide the best quality of experience for all. We have shared it with a few of our volunteers, and one comment under the strive for excellence, it said we put our customers at the centre of what we do. But to embed that across our volunteer workforce, customer wasn't quite the right word. So we've replaced that with our communities. So how do you feel about the values? Would you be happy to sign up to them as volunteers? Yeah, anyone opposed to them or any feedback? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next we're just going to have a quick look at our Maslow's Hierarchy of Need. Gail, if you want to start us off on that.
David's going to be delivering these couple of slides. So, yeah, welcome, David.
Welcome. Hi to everyone. I'm with Bowman and Warfield down in Berkshire. We're at full strength. We're 200 club members, to give you some idea on that. Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. Those of you that have done senior middle management sort of development programs and sales theory, sort of the need to grow the business and what's required is where Maslow's comes in. It's sort of 5 sort of layers. You start off at the bottom, the psychological needs. You get your house, you get your clothing, you're safe. Then you get your safety needs, sort of employment, money, property. And then on this one, it says love and belonging, but I'm looking more at the friendship and family of volunteers. And then the sort of, you get your respect within society, within the club, your self-esteem, your status, your strengths, your freedom. And the top is to be able to sort of do things and think things and drive things through. Next slide. So looking at it sort of stood up away, then we've got about 6 layers that we can actually look at. We've got the contentment, the safety, the property, the food. You've got your stability, you've got a job or you've retired from your job. You've got your income, money, pension, and you've, to all intents and purposes, got a lifestyle that you can maintain and you're happy with. And what you've now got is time to spare. And you want to sort of, with some people, it's a wish to change direction because their career has come to a sort of end, and COVID's going to do that to quite a few. But for the other people, it's a case of, well, I'm no longer working. What can I do? I don't want to stay in these 4 walls all day. It'll drive me around the bend. So you then sort of look at what you want to do, a desire to get out and meet people, maybe a sport that you've always been interested in, or it's a sport that you were involved in, but due to work reasons you haven't been. And so you sort of look to return. And with the time, you can sort of, well, what else can I do? Or that you can also bring in to the volunteer side your existing knowledge from your life skills, from your job. And you've got to remember on here, just because someone's an electrician or a builder, that they don't want to be doing all the wiring and building of club premises all the time. That's their day job. They want something different. And of course, the end is freedom. feeling empowered that you can actually make an impact, make changes. What you do is appreciated by everyone in the club. You become a valued club member, and in many ways, you get a new lifestyle. But the end of it is, as someone, one of the earlier slides is, your hobby does not want to become a full-time job. So just keep that in mind. Okay, Katie.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what we're going to discuss now is kind of how to get volunteers, recruiting, kind of a culture. And this picture here is kind of what we've looked at as kind of the volunteering journey. So awareness that actually people need volunteers. So as a club, that means you know, telling people basically that you need volunteers. The volunteer having some form of interest as well, and you know, awareness of what's around. You as a club then introducing them to it. Now that could just be taking them to a, I don't know if it's a competition, for example, taking to the competition and just seeing what it is. Then as a volunteer, you will go through an induction period, which will go through kind of a good induction in a minute. And then we need as a group to look at how you keep your volunteers. So our first one is, are you ready to recruit? So rather than just kind of go in, we need a load of volunteers and that's it. What we're trying to say is, look at your club and look at where your gaps are. Look at what people already do and the skills and experience people already have, and where can other people help. So rather than you just kind of going at all different people in the club going, can you help, can you help? What it does is it allows you to narrow it down. And also it allows you to understand if you actually do need a particular role in the club, or is it a nice to have. So therefore you can kind of manage which roles are essential at the time. So, you know, for example, at the moment, especially with COVID situation, what roles do we actually need at this point of time? You know, and other roles can come in at a later date when they're more needed. Then also kind of the tasks which need to be done, because bear in mind that just because somebody hasn't taken on a role doesn't mean that they can't perform one of the tasks. So therefore we break the roles down into just small bite-sized tasks. So this is our webpage, which is what I mentioned earlier. And what we've tried to do is, one, make it look a little bit more colourful. We've tried to put pictures throughout, not too much, you know, writing and things. But what we have done at the bottom is done some examples here of club roles and what their main tasks are and their skills associated with it. Now, one of the roles which not all clubs will be able to if they've hardly got any volunteers, but one of the ones is the volunteer coordinator. Now, what this will do, or the purpose of it, is to try and make your club have more of a volunteer culture to it. Because they are known as a volunteer coordinator, everybody knows who they're going to, everybody knows where they're going to get the information from. But it also shows that the club are thinking about their volunteers, and they're not just seeing them as, oh, they're, you know, the people who do things. They're actually seeing people as a volunteer, and that they're not, that they're integral to the sport. So feel free to go through this webpage. There are quite a few different, you know, additional tips, and this as well will be where our handy guide will be. We've also popped some of the logos down, so if you do want to do any kind of posters or leaflets or anything like that, feel free to use the logo, because again, what it tries to do is link us with the clubs. So allowing people to understand that you're all one volunteer under the same umbrella. So our next one is about creating the culture, which, as I said, this is where the volunteer coordinator kind of helps. So as a club, kind of have a vision for the club. Obviously, don't be, too bold, creative with it, but have something there which people want to achieve. And then the volunteer will have a goal as well. Trying to make sure that you've got a healthy relationship with your volunteers. So, speaking to people, discussing things with them, allowing them to move forward with you rather than you kind of dragging people along with you. Offering them training. With the volunteer role, it allows people to understand where they are also accountable for and what their tasks are. It's not a job, so obviously you're not tied to it, but it just makes them makes you as a volunteer understand that I'm club secretary, so this is what my task is. And then being organized is quite a large one, because a lot of the time, if you're not organized with your communication, people do then start to dwindle off because they don't feel that they're part of the group anymore. So recruiting. So this here is just kind of a few little things about kind of how to recruit and who to recruit. So kind of bring, as I mentioned earlier, if it was a competition, bring somebody in, show them what it's like. They don't have to say that they're volunteering that day. They could come in for 10 minutes, but at least it shows them what the volunteer actually does on that day. Bringing your friends in who are nothing to do with archery as well is quite important, because there are a lot of roles and tasks out there which you don't need to be a member of a club or even the organisation to actually do that particular task. Try and bring the parents in. The parents a lot of the time are just sitting in a tent if they're at a competition, or just sitting behind their athlete while they're, shooting for an hour or so at the club. See if they'll, have some involvement or anything like that. To stop people from kind of constantly doing the same things all the time and the same people, try and bring in some form of rota system. I know that's difficult with some clubs with, smaller amounts of volunteers in their club and things like that. But all it does is it kind of just it stops the same people having to do the same thing all the time. As I mentioned earlier, going outside of your organisations. There's lots of councils which do offer support with finding volunteers. Now, for example, last year we were meant to be doing the European Youth Championships, and what we did for that is we went to Telford Council and spoke to them, and they started advertising it for us. Now, I do understand that it's very different because it's a large competition, so you do get a lot of people coming. However, when we did the same thing in Nottingham in 2016, I think it was now, 2016, we have actually retained some of those volunteers. So it is, especially if you are a club who does big competitions, try and get you as a club out there. You might get 10 volunteers, but out of that, you could potentially get one who will carry on. So yes, it looks like you're a lot smaller than what you were at the beginning, but one's better than none. So also, one of the ways to recruit people is evolving a skills matrix. This allows you as a club to understand what your volunteers can do and what their experiences are. Now, as with the Maslow theory, that yes, people don't necessarily want to do their day jobs constantly, but within this matrix as well, you can also add something, which is what we are actually going to add, is what do people want to be involved in? Do they want to just cut the grass on the weekend? And then this allows you, for example, if you were the chairman of the club, to actually look at your club members and go, okay, well, they can do this, let's go and ask them, rather than kind of going to everybody else and seeing if everybody can do things. It just kind of narrows things down, and it means that you don't feel that you're nagging people constantly as well. There are a couple of different organisations here. We will send the slides out for you, but these are just a couple of national programs really of kind of how to get volunteers. One of the big ones that I would say is useful is the schools and the universities. A lot of university students do need volunteering on their you know, CVs and things like that. So if you can try to get into some of the universities. Now, obviously, they do have the clubs within their universities, but some of them are also more than willing to help outside of that. So it's worth trying to, you know, push wherever you can. And as the NGV, we want to try and provide you with as much resources as we can. So that includes all the, you know, different links to all the different websites, but also if you want us to do anything in terms of creating posters or anything like that, we're more than willing to do that, which is why we've created an induction process, an induction template, which is on the volunteering page here. So it's kind of just a checklist, just so you can go through when you get a new volunteer, all these different things. Now, what that does is it helps, hopefully, in the future, you retain one of the volunteers. So just before I carry on in terms of retaining, Nikki Ledwick has graciously said that she will help with this. Nikki is going to go just kind of tell her experiences of how they do it in their club and, to be honest, some of the things which haven't worked and how they've overcome it. So if Nikki, you're around.
I'm here.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Hello, so I'm Nikki. I'm the chairperson of Eagle Bowman of Bedford. Eagles are around 5 years old, so 2015, and we started off with 5 members. So starting right at the beginning, every single one of us was a volunteer because every single one of us had to take on a role to make the club work. As you can imagine, that was quite a strain on the members, and it grew to be very, very obvious that if we didn't support those volunteers and move the balance between club work and actual shooting, we were going to lose those and the club wasn't going to work. So on our second iteration of how the club was going to work, we attempted to increase the number of people we had. We then took the decision to limit the roles to one person to one role. And although that took quite a couple of seasons to get that running, and it didn't work as well as we'd hoped it would do. So we ended up with it being very disjointed. We ended up with committee meetings lasting hours and hours because you ended up with way too many people trying to talk about probably not the right things. One thing we did gain for that was that we had a lot of people with professional skills coming in and taking on certain roles which helped progress that section of our club. So, for example, I know it was mentioned that people don't want to do their day jobs in these clubs, but we took on a finance director who took on our treasurer's role. That got us running, and then they were able to teach somebody else how to do that role. So out of that iteration, we did gain that as a very positive way forward. When we went on to what we now call our iteration 3, we slimmed back our committee numbers and tiered our committee into certain roles. So we ended up with a senior leadership team, and most of those people do their role as a profession. So it is very much controlled. So chairman, I'm a project manager, statistician by trade. So I've taken on that project management style role. Our treasurer is somebody who deals with finance still. So we still have that section going on, and that works very, very well. The next level down, we've made it a little less formal. So things like equipment officer, coach and rep, membership secretary, records officer, all that sort of line, they are a little less formal when it comes to being full-time roles on the committee. Every single one of those roles has a team that helps them. So if I take equipment, for example, we have an overall equipment officer, and she is working her socks off at the moment, going through every single bit of kit we have to try and get it ready for when we reopen after COVID. But she's not on her own, because we have a woodworker who's helping her with all the things like stands and everything. So she doesn't have to take on that section. Because trying to find somebody who can run every single bit of kit regarding an archery centre is pretty tough to come by. So by setting it down into different groups like that and having that support group for a role, we found we've got far more people volunteering to help. and to take on and get that section of stuff done. And that works across all our things. So on the social side of things, we have a group of people do that. We have some fantastic cake bakers. So that if we need anything doing, ask a cake, but they can't do anything else, they'll bake a cake for us. And that keeps all the other volunteers happy. Other key points I wanted to bring up. One of the things I went through on that third tier iteration was, why were people not that interested in volunteering, not getting involved either ad hoc or within the committee role? And as I said, I'm a statistician and research based in my previous roles. So I set out a lovely little survey. I do love a survey. And one of the questions I asked was, why? Why aren't you? Why can't you? Why won't you? And the main key point I got back from that was that they didn't know what they were volunteering for. And one of the things that Katie put on the previous slides was job descriptions. So I have written a job description for every single one of our committee roles and the subgroups, so that if somebody is interested in the volunteering, there's a lovely little pack in our armory that has all the job roles written down, so they can see what they're going to let themselves in for. That was a breakthrough moment. It really was, because we had people volunteering out the woodwork, suddenly saying, oh, but I can do that. I can't give 7 hours of it, but I can do 2 hours. So also by having the groups, we actually managed to spread out the load on the volunteers, and they still feel it's part of their club, because it is very much an Eagles. If you're an Eagle, it is your club. And spreading that load around meant that everybody was having a little piece of playing and volunteering. And yes, certainly I can definitely share those with people. Yes, not a problem. So, and allowing the main group of people to concentrate on some of the other stuff as well. So we are currently operating under our tiered committee roles with the job prescriptions for recruiting. We also have the permanent support groups and the ad hoc support groups. If we need, what do we last have as a volunteer section?
Disabled ramps.
The disabled ramps. We were donated a load of disabled ramps from the school we operate in to take up to our woods. So you can see my background, that's my woods. And we had 5 people who have never volunteered for us before, taken these disabled ramps apart, stuck them on a trailer and took them over to our woods. It's an ad hoc section, and because they were going to be there in their socially distanced groups of 2, we spread that across the day, and people were more than happy to give an hour doing that rather than say it's going to take us half a day to do. Oh, I can't give half a day. So reducing that down with the additional support of the groups is great. The other thing that I definitely would advocate is thanking your volunteers. Even if they've just made you a cake, thank them. We put it up all across our social media when we've had some success, like taking these ramps down, and everyone gets name checked. Everyone gets something, even if it's just a set of cupcakes, everyone gets something for it, because at the end of the day, they are doing it for free, they are volunteering, and it's important to appreciate the amount of work they're doing. So yes, we've had some failures in our 5 years of trying to get this all to work, but I think at the moment we're in a pretty good place with a darn good set of volunteers and a darn good set of in the club who are just sat there waiting to be able to get going again. Okay.
Thank you so much, Nikki. This kind of leads on as well. It just shows that some of the ideas as well, which we've been discussing and are looking into as well, how it's actually transferred into a club. You know, we've created job roles as well, if you want to look at them, but we've also created a checklist for an induction, to try and allow that individual to get as much experience as they can while they're coming, and also that chat when they're coming there as well. And it just shows that all these things, just even if it feels like just a small thing, like, changing a role to small tasks, it's quite clear from Nikki's club that these types of things do have some form of impact. Also, we've got a governance code, which it tends to say that, somebody shouldn't hold their position for more than 3 years. Now, again, it's very difficult to necessarily change that person as a whole sometimes, but it is quite easy to add somebody else to their role, just to help them and bring new ideas in. Because the thing is, over 5-10 years, a lot of things change, and if you keep the same people all the time, you're never going to get those new ideas in. And I understand a lot of clubs are very old, so they do have kind of this an older structure to them, and they have had people in some of those particular roles for years and years and years and years. But I think as a club member, it's up to you as well to kind of go, we need to push this a little bit. And Nikki's club is just the perfect one to show that they have shook things up, multiple times. And yeah, it's, it might not have worked straight away, or it's took a little bit longer, but it's also working. And I think that is the most important thing, is it's working and they are retaining their volunteers. Then we've just got a few little different things about rewarding and recognizing individuals. So as Nikki said, just a thank you sometimes goes a long way. I mean, I was talking to a volunteer the other day, and she's had a lot of volunteers who volunteered for one day and then they didn't volunteer again. And some of that was literally just because they had no thank you or no proper induction. It was kind of, they were thrown into it and that was it. So just small things can make actually big difference. I mean, as a club, you can't give lots and lots of gifts out every single week for every single individual, but you can say a thank you. You can write an article and pop it on your website that somebody's done something within your club. And again, like I said earlier, it could just be cutting their grass, but you're acknowledging what somebody has done for the club as a whole. And also what it does is it allows your members who don't volunteer to understand how much volunteering goes into your club. Does anybody have any questions for either myself or Nikki on the rest of it? Or does anybody have anything that they've done themselves which hasn't worked or has worked, which they could help anybody else with? No? Okay, I think Gail's going to carry on just a little bit longer.
Yeah, it was just to basically take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you who are our volunteers and do so much for the sport. We always support National Volunteer Week, so that's just to say thank you. And then I think the next slide is just a few useful links. So obviously the Archery GB webpage that Katie has just shown and put in the chat box. I'm sure you're aware of Club Matters. Again, they've got so many fantastic resources on there, and they run workshops, which I suppose you could link into to support your club volunteers. UK Coaching, they've got loads of resources and coaching courses as well. And then finally, it's NCVO, which are a sort of national volunteering organisation. They have loads of resources as well. And then that's pretty much the end of the slides. So should we not share the screen and just have any conversations? Has anyone got any questions or want to share their experiences or any comments?
We understand this is a lot of information all at the same time for people, and everything is out there for people on the website. And, as Nikki's kindly said, that she'll offer the roles and responsibilities out to people if they need that from her club. But do feel comfortable that you can come to Archery GB and ask for, whatever you want. If you want some support, or if, you need just an idea of how to do something, if you've got, you're struggling with something and you just can't get it out of your head and you can't figure out another way around it, just feel free to contact us. I mean, we've got people on, as you've seen today, who kindly volunteered to help us with this PowerPoint, who will also most likely be able to help in the future for yourself as well. Is that Mandy?
It is, yeah. It's been really interesting listening to the various people on here about the volunteer roles, because I think Gail in particular is aware of the struggles that I've had at my club about keeping volunteers, and actually, you know, even getting people to be on the committee has been a huge battle. And it's not because, you know, I'm an ogre or a horrible person or anything like that, quite the contrary, you know. And I think it's, for me, partly I'd like people to have the same passion that I have for the sport. And I think probably I am a bit of a nemesis, you know, probably my own worst enemy in some situations. But Nikki's presentation really gave me hope, because we're the same age as Nikki's club, and we sadly have had quite a not a negative journey, but we lost our original chair, who set the club up, which obviously threw everything into complete turmoil. And I was the person that the chair wanted to be his replacement, even though I hadn't got a clue about anything to do with archery. So I have gone in pretty much blind, and I'm here 3 years later looking at things like this to reaffirm that some of the things I'm doing are right, but also giving me some great ideas of what I can do now moving forward to try and get a committee engaged, and engaged with getting everybody in the club involved in running it. So hopefully when COVID-19 allows us to get out there, and what is quite interesting is I've actually organised a committee meeting for Thursday, and some of the things that we've covered here are already things that I'm going to ask them. And I'm basically going to say to my committee, I need your help. You know, if you want the club to succeed and to continue and to grow, you know, I'm going to, you know, I know it says I, and I'm not a I in team, but at the moment I am the force of the club. I am the reason why this club is still going. So I just want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to proving to people like Gail and Katie and everyone else that I will get a good volunteer workforce, and I will get a good committee, and we're all going to be celebrating with cake when we're allowed to, because that's one thing our club does have. We've got cake bakers, so I like that, Nikki, because cake solves everything. So just want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to the next part of Newark Castle Archers' journey in really getting a good volunteer base at our club. So thank you.
That's great.
Mandy.
I'm sure it will work, and you'll be able to push forward with it. I think that just proves as well, from what happened to your club previously, how important succession planning is as well with this, and how important it is to, you know, get the people behind. Yes, they might not have a role, they might just have a small task, but at least you're starting to bring people in, because then something like that, which did happen at your club, is less likely to go. You know, it still might change the club a lot, but it, you know, at least it doesn't leave one person having to try and do everything.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is quite relevant for our club is that the club secretary was the second person to set the club up with the chair at the time, and she's very young. She's about to get married, which I know for a fact at some point she is going to step down. So already I'm now thinking we need to get someone trained up to potentially take over that role or share that role with her. So this is really good, with the fact that it's giving me that little kick. Yes, need to start preparing for different roles, and like you say, just because one person does that role, we can now look at a couple of other people that can help them with it, but also learn along the way. So yeah, good, happy.
Mandy, a quick thought this is from the sailing side that I used to be involved in, is that the Commodore and the Vice Commodore could only hold that position for a set number of years. So you have to plan succession. And whoever was going to be the Commodore actually had 3 years shadowing as the Vice Commodore.
Yeah, because I didn't realise that roles potentially should only be for 3 years, and then you should change it. it's not a legal thing, is it? But I
No.
understand the process, because like you say, and I think probably with older clubs, if you've got the same chair that's been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years and the same equipment officer, then obviously, you know, you get a bit same old, don't you? So yeah, it's bringing fresh blood into the mix, as they say.
Yeah.
Yep, like it.
Try
I
it.
think we've got something from Dave as well.
Yep, right. I'll just get myself on picture. Is it going to work? Give it a chance to come up. Right, where's my webcam? Right, so while the computer talks about through my security to get the webcam to work, oh yes it is. I can see my pictures here at the bottom. Okay, for us, I'm not talking on behalf of Guildford, but I've been a member for a few years and held quite a few volunteer positions. What's been interesting is that the topics you've covered are excellent and form a very good structure for what we need to do is have a reset, because we've always had a large volunteering, well, a fairly large volunteering group. COVID has decimated that because we're not seeing them, we're not talking to them. And likewise, the committee has been the same committee for a few years now and needs to change again. So what we've got here are elements of a change process needed within the club. And we've recently just gone through a big change process where I threw out the Excel sheet, being membership secretary. I said I'll only do the job if I get a software installed that manages the whole club membership. And that's been a dream come true for a lot of people. And I will stay on again doing that, making sure that's embedded and that change is cemented as part of the culture of the club. So what you've got now is volunteers, right? What we have is key players doing the same thing day in, day out. Same thing as regards to the job. It's the same volunteers that always can be guaranteed to turn up to organise, help run an event. And what you have indicated to myself, and I'll take this back to the exec, is that there are certain things on your website, on our website, we can go to, checkpoint them, and go away and say, right, let's start from zero. Let's see what we want volunteers for, things that you've actually mentioned during this evening, and target how we get that. Succession planning, yes, that's something we've done in the past, and we're hoping that by the end of this, coming up to October, when we change the committee, our succession plans work and people haven't given up because of COVID. So I'm not doing archery anymore. So thank you very much for tonight. I've enjoyed it. I've got 2 sides of A4 here, notes, and I'll be diving into your website. Thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic. Greg, you've put in the chat box that you've sort of done some succession planning, that you maybe took over as deputy treasurer and then stepped in as full treasurer. Do you want to sort of talk through anything?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Greg.
Okay. Yeah, I've been in the club for nearly 4 years now, and I first took over as child protection, and then I became a vice just to help lighten the load. Another member is on the call tonight, Chris. He's now secretary. He was the vice secretary. So a few years ago, Jim Rogers, I don't know if many of you have heard of him. He was quite big. He was I think it was a national judge, and he left quite a lot of money for our clubs, but he'd done everything. He ran the secretary at the actual overall ground, and he'd done the cricket, he'd done the archery, he'd done the regional secretary, he's done absolutely everything for archery. And once he passed away, everything just exploded. No one knew what to do, so obviously we had to put interim chair and secretary, and I think a lot of people took on more than what they wanted. And like it was discussed earlier tonight, that sometimes this hobby of ours is more of a job than a hobby. But I do actually enjoy doing the work, and I don't expect praise, but it's nice to get a thank you. And it would be nice, like Mandy said, getting more people to take a little bit of the role. We've tried to kind of break it up even more, just to say, if we've got a competition, for example, someone sort out the medals, someone sort out the raffle prizes, very small chunks just to help them, but we're still finding a bit of a struggle to even get that done. The committee seems to be working very well, and we're actually moving location now. But there is only 5 on our committee now, but it seems to work well because we had about 15 and there was a lot of discussion and arguments, obviously a lot of opinions. But all these webinars are absolutely great. Obviously, we're picking up a lot of information. Me and Chris only took over our roles in August, where we had a meeting on the field because we didn't sort out anything electronically. But we're hoping to have our next AGM come March. Whether that happens or not, it might get pushed back again. But yeah, there's just so much going on, and obviously these webinars are helping us a lot. It seems to be there's only me and Chris at the moment, but yeah, we're feeding back, and obviously we're forwarding the YouTube videos and slides and everything. So we're feeding back to the club, and they can see that how much work we are doing, and we've actually got thanks from other people. I don't think some members realise how much work is involved in it. And yeah, that's all I can say at the moment.
That is one thing that we actually do want to do. As you've seen the volunteer journey slide, we also would quite like a similar slide, but what it takes to run a club. So if anybody has kind of something they would like to, discuss with me with that, I just want kind of like a picture, and it takes, 5 things, this, because I do think that pictures are very, very, vocal to, an archer. They can be put on social or whatever and everything, and they're right there. And I think that really will show your members, what it takes to run the club, and that you're not there and you're not paid to do it. So if anybody has any ideas on that, please let me know, and we can kind of like look at forming a group about it, because I would like that as kind of our next step is, just showing people what it takes, to run the club.
Yeah, in our group, Katie, that met last Thursday, we said it would be really nice to sort of do a bit of a video of a club with all the different people, someone mowing the grass, someone baking the cake, someone eating the cake, just sort of like a quick video just to show how many people are involved in running a club. No, well, thank you everyone very much for your contributions to tonight. It's fantastic. It's just sharing information, isn't it? We are a team and we're all helping each other. Mandy?
Yeah, I'm just going off on a little tangent here, because you know how we're just talking about rewarding or awarding volunteers, or having some form of system for volunteers. And just as an example, because I volunteer for the NHS, for the vaccine centre, and what they do with their volunteers is they all have a band. So you wear an armband that has your role in it, so that people can see you're a volunteer and can see if you're admin, vaccinator, pharmacist or anything like that. So I'm wondering, maybe we could somehow, with volunteers in archery, just so then that people can identify they're a volunteer and a part of the workforce. So if they're at, our club, that someone knows they're the equipment officer, especially for new people joining the club. So you've got some form of ID band. Just thought it'd be an idea of somehow, particularly with the logo, because your volunteer workforce logo is so cool. And I'm sure volunteers would love to have that logo somewhere, and then just have, what role they're playing. And it can be generic, so it doesn't have to have their name on it. So that armband can then be given to the next volunteer that's going to take part. So they're all wearing it, and it's a form of ID. I can see some funny actions going on in my screen. Am I doing that in my hands? But so that was just an idea, because as all volunteers, we're all, like you say, we're all volunteers. And I think we all want a bit of recognition from what we do, whether that's the chair, the club secretary, the equipment officer, the cake maker. I mean, I'd quite like to wear cake eater, but you know, but I'm thinking maybe something like that Archery GB could come up with, but that then clubs could probably all use. So it's the same in every club. So that, you know, so it follows through with everything. And then volunteers that come from another club to help, say my club, have got that same band on, so people can identify who they are straight away before they've even talked to them.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Thank you, Mandy. We did have an idea of maybe some badges, but
oh, I like a pin badge.
What would you prefer, badge or armband?
I think an armband, because it's more there, and it's that's for me. I mean, obviously, you know, put it out there in the world of archery, but it works very well in the NHS, and straight away you can see, soon as you come to that person, even when you've said hello, how are you, blah blah blah, they know what you are by what you've got on your arm, because it's legible and colour coded.
Yeah, and if other people are already familiar with that process, as you said, if you have it in the NHS, then yeah.
You know, or even a, you know, a thingy, what do you call them, band that wear a badge on. Yeah, archery, you know one, lanyard.
Lanyard.
Yay!
Tabard.
You're off.
There's a few ideas.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Mandy. Yeah, and if there is any other resources that you feel as clubs you want, whether they're posters, then please let us know. And yeah, we can get them designed. Fantastic. Well, if there's no sort of further comments or questions, then we will finish there, and hopefully we'll have the handy guide ready.
Just one, Gail, thought I'd ask before you go. It just popped up in my mind. Myself and Greg, we've been talking about like a volunteer reward scheme, and we're trying to get juniors involved. And where we live locally, used to be a scheme many moons ago called Millennium Volunteers, where basically people used to log hours, do like activities, like that type of stuff, and you got like rewards on like sort of building up the hours. And like, for example, when you got like 10 hours, you got a certificate, 20 hours, you got a certificate, and like so on and so on, till you got to like an awards thing. It would be nice to see if Archery GB could do something like sort of similar to that, so it could like sort of get sort of our juniors more involved in like sort of volunteering. Because myself and Greg were looking at it is something we could do at the club currently, because volunteers sometimes gets a bit political. If we were doing like sort of an application process, we could have a log at how much time people have volunteered, and if we were discussing it at a committee, it would be easy to decide on a decision than basically giving that person like sort of the role or responsibility.
To be honest, that was something we were looking at in terms of pin badges. We were looking at, again, this is probably our next, after we've done the handy guide, kind of our next working group with volunteers, is looking at how Archery GB can do a, you know, some form of reward scheme. We were thinking like, you know, badges 1 to 10 or whatever, and that to do with number of hours. But the thing is that there will be some people who literally done it within a week. So like when we thought about it so much, we wanted something kind of tangible as well. But yeah, when we get to it, we'd love your ideas on it, because that was kind of our next like project with this, is just trying to get the NGB to also recognise everybody as well, because it means, you know, you could go around and have your badge on. You know, if you're shooting, you've got your badge on. It just shows people that it's you know, it's all around.
Definitely, because that's the thing. A lot of our guys love badges and certificates and awards, but they don't love the volunteer side. So give them a good badge, they might volunteer.
Yeah, no, thank you. We also have an ambassador program that Nikki or Ben had said. So they've been in post 2 years now, and we're so proud.
Would you be able to forward if my email's registered? Could you forward me some information? That'd be great to hear some more. Because with me just stepping into the role, a lot of information I'm learning now is completely new to me. So it'd be great to learn more about that type of thing to try and get our guys involved, because we're kind of like sort of cut off. I'm finding up in like this area in the north from the guys, because these seminars have been great to meet other people from different counties and sort of like organisations and see how they do it. Because when we speak to a lot of people locally, they don't seem to have any like sort of contact, any like sort of like the outside world. Durham and like Northam seems to be like the only place on the planet. Like anything that happens outside the county never goes anywhere.
Yeah, no, brilliant. We've got your details, I think, from registering. So yeah, we can send you out some information.
That's great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you, Nikki, for sharing about the ambassadors. Yeah, we are so proud of the ambassadors. They've achieved so much, and just even from a comms point of view, just sharing the work they're doing, it's really positive. Right, well, thank you so much.